From John Muir's early days to the more recent accomplishments like Free Solo, Yosemite Valley has been the center of the American rock climbing community. The valley has always had a legendary, transcendental quality, and it has hosted many of the most important climbs in sports history. In 1988, a series of events led to one of the greatest climbs of all time. Hello and welcome back to Adventure Uncovered. In today's video, we will go back to the Stone Masters in the 1980s and the day that Todd Skinner and Paul Piana discovered their place in the world's history of climbing. This is the account of the final significant ascent in Yosemite history, which signaled the end of an era and established the current climbing scene that we're familiar with today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel Adventure Uncovered and hit that bell icon for more interesting content. So, let's dive in. Todd Skinner, a cowboy who was raised in the Wyoming ranch during his formative years, was one of the most famous, accomplished, and widely respected rock climbers in America throughout the 1970s and 80s. Skinner went on a climbing break and never came back. In the meantime, he spent his time chasing the weather throughout America and relentlessly honing his climbing skills to catch up to the top climbers. When reading about Skinner, the only words that come to mind are genuine or pure. Those who know him described him as endlessly optimistic, charming, and happy. He asked people questions and remembered what they said. Even the climbers who disagreed with Skinner's ethics enjoyed his personality, his limitless desire for adventure, and his persistent pleading with them to leave their housewife, children, and dog behind and travel with him. In search of fame, glory, and the American dollar, one of the things I find heartbreaking about Skinner is that he never fully broke through. He was fanatical in his pursuit of being the first American to transmit 514. He never quite made it. But in the 1980s, a new challenge emerged, and this is where Skinner's name would be etched into climbing history. Around 1980, the climbing world began to focus on the possibility of a free ascent of El Capitan. Ray JARDINE freed the west face of El Cap in 1977. However, due to how far it is off the side of the wall, many people did not even consider this a legitimate El Cap route, and the question lingered as to whether El Cap could ever be free climbed. It's so vast and so empty that it was possible in 1979 for two climbers, named Mark Hudden and Max Jones, to make a speed run up the Salathé wall, climbing in a manner known as free as can be. They employed aid on the most difficult sections of the route, even after all that it turned out to be was just about 300 feet. Hudden and Jones attempted at the bar for what was feasible on El Cap, and others began to speculate about how difficult those 300 feet would be. Many thought El Cap would remain unclimbable, but a few optimists saw Hudden and Jones's ascent as a sign that Yosemite's grandest wall would someday be free. Todd Skinner was one of those people, and he saw the lab as one of the last greatest challenges in the climbing world in 1985. He began to look at a partner, and he soon settled on Paul Piana. Paul Piana, who was born in Wyoming in the 1950s, believed that the pioneering spirit of his family, who were among the first to settle in the state, was instilled in him at a young age. He wanted to be a fighter pilot, but he discovered rock climbing when he was young, and it became his passion. Since he and Todd Skinner had been longtime climbing partners, Todd first approached Paul with the idea of free climbing SCHUBERT in 1985, and the two hatched a plan to be the ones to do it before others could even attempt. And their planning had to be done in complete secrecy. The lengths that these two went to keep other climbers from finding out about their goal are hilarious. They would compare notes, commit them to memory, and then burn the paper, shipping the ashes off far to the reaches of the world. They even kicked their girlfriends out of the houses to keep them from overhearing. They even tried to disguise themselves in the Camp 4 parking lot, which failed miserably. This is what I enjoy about the story. Not the difficult climbing or the historic significance of it, but how important it was to these two, how seriously they took it, and how ridiculously fun it must have been. They were frightened of other climbers achieving it first, so they went to extraordinary lengths to protect their first ascent. Although Todd and Paul made a series of reconnaissance trips up the Salathé wall in 1988, things didn't go well. The climbing was brutally difficult, and by August, the two were convinced that they would need at least another season of work before it would go. Furthermore, they were out of money, and I don't just mean their credit cards were maxed, they genuinely had a combined net worth of $12.48. And they couldn't even buy enough food to make a serious attempt on Salathé. Alternatively, they could leave the valley train in the off-season and return the following year, but by then, someone else may have sent the route and their dream would be gone. If you think that they were just going to play it safe and then wait and risk someone stealing their route, they had a yard sale in the Camp 4 parking lot selling off everything they owned. A new pair of shoes, some cams, and a hangboard to raise funds by the end of it. They had no worldly possessions other than what they needed for the climb, but they had $100 in food money, and so they cashed it in and headed for the base of Salathé. What followed was an ascent of epic proportions. The two blazed up the first 10 pitches before venturing into uncharted territory. Todd started up an unprotectable 5, 9 off width, struggling with the unfamiliar style of climbing. Unbeknownst to him, his rope was way too short to complete the pitch, so while Todd was fighting for his life 1,000 feet off the ground, Paul untied from his anchor and simultaneously climbed up behind him, free soloing the off-width. The pair were met with pitch after pitch of hard climbing granite in the high 12s and low 13s. They pushed their way up, tearing their skin and racking up minor injuries, but somehow impossibly gaining ground on the massive Salathé headwall finally. They crank through the last hard pitches of the Great Roof, cruise the easier top section, and reach the finish. When hauling their gear up the final pitch, the boulder that they had used as a belay gave out, crushing Paul's legs and throwing Todd off the edge, snapping their anchor. Only a backup python that Paul had clipped as an afterthought saved the two of them from certain death. They were broken and bruised, but they were still alive, and they had accomplished their days-long odyssey to become the first pair ever to free climb the world-famous El Capitan, in what I call Yosemite's last great ascent. The achievements that followed this, like the Lynn Hill Dawn Wall or Free Solo, aren't that noteworthy. The Salathé was one of the first great Yosemite routes to use rappel reconnaissance and bolting, ushering in a new era of climbing in America. Skinner's death comes on the heels of the recent loss of another outdoor explorer, Brian SCHUBERT, who created the extreme sport of base jumping when he and a friend fastened parachutes to their back and plunged down El Capitan cliff in 1966, died Saturday on his first jump in 40 years. SCHUBERT, a former Pomona police officer, was murdered when his parachute opened too late after jumping off an 876-foot bridge into the New River Gorge in Fayetteville, YVA. Why would Skinner, one of the world's most accomplished climbers, risk his life on severely unstable gear? Belay loops are a relatively new addition to climbing harnesses, but they have quickly become very common. Initially, there was widespread skepticism regarding their safety, but they have gradually gained acceptance in society. When used appropriately, they're as safe as any other piece of climbing equipment, but as Skinner's tragic death demonstrates, your equipment is only as good as your judgment. So we've now come to the end of today's video. I hope you've learned something from this. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below, and also don't forget to subscribe to this channel, Adventure Uncovered, and hit that bell icon. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.